Hello and welcome back to the channel where I provide regular cricket content on interesting topics. Today's video is a continuation of my greatest test batsmen of the 1990s list. Just as a reminder, the qualifying total was that they had to have scored at least 2,000 runs in a decade. So without further delay, let's get back on with the list. Number 5, Graham Gooch. Hurrah, an Englishman. Plus one who deserves to be there. Graham Gooch was one of England's most successful batsmen of all time, with 8,900 runs in 118 test matches during his career. He actually made his test debut way back in 1975, but it was in the 1990s that he really hit his peak. Do you think I've gone mad? How can someone hit their peak 15 years after their debut? Well, you hit the ground running in the 90s for one. In 1990, Gooch scored a mammoth 333 against India at Lord's, which to this day is the highest score of all time by an Englishman. He followed it up with another 100 in the same match. Gooch's style of play was based on solid defense and impeccable technique, which made him a difficult batsman to dislodge. He was also a great player of spin and played some memorable innings against the likes of Shane Warne. Over the course of his career, Gooch averaged 42.6, but in the 1990s he scored 4,200 runs at a very impressive average of 51.6. All whilst being in his late 30s and early 40s. That for me is good enough for him to rank in the top 5. Number 4, Steve Waugh. Another Australian pest who was responsible for partly ruining this Pom's childhood. Steve Waugh was one of Australia's most successful captains and batsmen, with 10,927 runs in 168 test matches. He made his test debut in 1985, but like Gooch, it was the 1990s that he established himself as a world-class batsman. In 1999, Waugh scored an unbeaten 200 against the West Indies in Kingston, which was then his highest individual score in test cricket. Waugh was known for his gritty determination and his ability to score runs under pressure. He was also a good fielder and a great leader, who led Australia to many memorable victories. I remember thinking about Steve Waugh in that if he was at the crease, Australia were never out of the game. In the 90s, Waugh scored 6,200 runs at an average of 53.1 and broke many English hearts along with other opposing fans around the world. Therefore he is my number 4. Number 3, Aravinda de Silva. One of the game's best entertainers, De Silva possessed the strengths of many of the best short-in-stature run scorers. He had unruffable technique, was strong at cutting and hooking, and was an unrepentant attacker. Standing just 5 feet 3.5 inches, you could make an argument there has not been a better smaller player. When the Sri Lankan great first really burst on the scene, he was known to be a dashing stroke maker, but occasionally prone to giving his wicket away. He was actually given the nickname of Mad Max due to this tendency. Over time and experience, however, he developed into one of the best batsmen of his era, peaking in around the mid-90s. Probably his most well-known performance was in one-day cricket, where he guided Sri Lanka to a memorable tournament victory in 1996. But De Silva was merrily chalking up runs in the test arena as well. I can distinctly remember him batting, chin strapped slightly to one side and carving England around off the back foot. Over the course of the 90s he scored nearly 4,500 runs at an average of 46.8. He actually had a better record against the great Australian team than he had overall, showing his ability to take on the best. Number 2, Sachin Tendulkar. Sachin Tendulkar is widely regarded as one of the greatest batsmen of all time, with 15,921 runs in 200 test matches. He made his test debut in 1989 and played for over 2 decades, during which he amassed an incredible number of records and achievements. I would argue that the Indian great was at his peak towards the end of the 90s, where he seemed to score at will against most sides. In fact, between 1997 and 2000 he averaged around 72 runs an innings. Overall in the 1990s, Tendulkar scored several memorable innings, including his unbeaten 155 against Australia in Chennai in 1998. Tendulkar's style of play was based on a combination of skill, timing, and aggression. He had a vast array of shots and could play both fast bowling and spin equally well. He scored 5,600 runs over the course of the 90s at an otherworldly average of 58. Number 1, Brian Lara. In what could have been a toss-up between Tendulkar and Lara, I leant towards the West Indian for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I would argue that the West Indians, particularly of the latter part of the decade, were a worse side than India. Lara would have been more likely coming in under pressure in difficult circumstances. I also generally preferred watching Lara bat. I loved his high bat lift and his trigger movements which instantly showed intent. He was flamboyance and brilliance all at once. Then there were his big performances. Where do you start with them? Perhaps when he announced himself to the world in 1993, scoring 277 away from home against a good Australian bowling attack. Or what about his record-breaking 375 in 1994? I remember watching that thinking he may never get out. Overall in the 1990s, Lara scored 5,600 runs at an average of 51.6. He scored runs all around the world and all around the wicket. Like Tendulkar, he carried the weight of a cricketing nation on his shoulders, but unlike Sachin, he didn't have the same firepower behind him to back him up. For those reasons, Brian Charles Lara is my number one batsman of the 1990s. So that's it. What do you all think? If anyone wants to argue that Sachin was better, I won't fight you. They were both amazing. Is there anyone you think I missed out from the top 10 perhaps? See my other video for numbers 10 to 6, but there are some great batsmen there. The two who may feel hard done by to be left out of my top 10 are probably David Boone and Inzamam ul Haq. Both very good batsmen, but I just couldn't find room for them. If you want them in, be sure to tell me who you're kicking out. As ever, thank you so much for watching.